We had a terrific team shot by Jonathan Van Tulken. I also worked with Marcella Said on a bunch of episodes. Of course, Ridley Scott, and then Peter Craig, who was the showrunner, executive producer, and also director on one of the episodes. He was the one that really made sure that the overall arc of the story was being told correctly. Each episode planting us for the next episode, and everything made sense. Crime dramas, there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of pieces and parts we have to track.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hitchings of Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their skill set. You can learn more on filmmakeru.com, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. Every week, we interview a film professional, and this week we are joined by Eric Litman, ACE, whose work includes Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, Star Trek Picard, and Dope Thief. We're going to be focusing on Dope Thief, which is available on Apple TV. The narrative centers on two lifelong friends from Philadelphia, Ray and Manny, who impersonate DEA agents to rob small-time drug dealers. That is until their scheme takes a turn when they inadvertently target a narcotics operation under DEA surveillance. Welcome, Eric. And you have edited episodes 103, 104, and 107 from Dope Thief. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you for having me. Very nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Yes, I worked on episodes 3, 4, and 7, and just an absolute blast to be a part of them. Each one was, each one had a various different tone, different element to it, but ultimately getting it all to fit cohesively with the overall of the show was our main objective.
So I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to ask you about the third episode, which is Run, Die, or Relapse. Things are getting really intense for Ray and Manny. How did you intensify your edit to illustrate the stakes at this point in the story?
These episodes were shot over a long period of time. That episode was shot originally before the strikes, and we got up to episodes 5, and we had to pause for a little bit. And when we came back, we sort of examined where the story was going, what was happening. We resumed production, and the story had shifted a little bit in terms of where they wanted to go. So they reshot more scenes for specifically episode 3. And how did we ramp up the tension? How do we make the alliance and the people that are coming after Ray and Manny even more threatening than they already were? So we added some scenes. There was a scene shot where the nameless goons come and come after Malik to torture him and ultimately try to get information out of him. And what was interesting about that scene was there was a lot of double entendres happening there. We think that Ray's come looking for Manny. And we think then that he has sold Manny a gun because Manny is, out on the run. But what we find out at the end, and he's protecting Ray, Malik's protecting Ray. And what we find at the end is that he really sold Manny a ring, which makes Malik's death even more tragic. He was really out to protect Ray, and he was really a good guy. And it was a tough scene to shoot. It was a tough scene to edit because you felt so bad for this guy. And it's like, okay, I think we're pulling this off. And when they come and they find the head in the box at the end, and it just was it was a pretty graphic scene, and we had to cut it just to the right point so that we understood. So we weren't gratuitous, we weren't in your face, but we also were making sure the audience understood what was happening. So we were very specific on where that cut point happened, where the edit point happened for the reveal of the box. And then the other aspects of that episode that were really important is at the end of the episode, we wanted to make sure everything was happening simultaneously. So how did we do that? We did that through intercutting. We wanted to make sure that the DEA that was surveilling Ray and the bikers that they were sort of watching everything at the same time. So there was a lot of information that was being said on one end that was being answered on the other, but we were making sure we were still asking questions to to keep the audience questioning what's happening, so we can keep the momentum happening. And we did that also through very propulsive cutting. We wanted to make sure the momentum was moving us forward. We made sure we had a nice cue that tied everything together, so it felt like everything was happening simultaneously. So that when we get to that scene at the end during the proposal and you think everything is sort of okay, you could take a breath. And ultimately, it was not okay.
I grew up in a household in the projects in East Harlem. There's a program at WNET, the public television station, to get more people of color behind the camera, in the editing room, doing sound, writing scripts. When they put me in a dark room and they showed me how to use the splicer and the rewinds, I felt this big sigh of relief, this sense of, wow, I found my space. The editing part of filmmaking is the real nuts and bolts of what makes films come to life. You can ask Spielberg, you can ask Tarantino, you can ask Spike. When you sit here, this is where the proof is in the pudding. I'm Sam Pollard, and this is my class on documentary editing.
Yeah, no, it definitely was not okay. And I just want to say that the editing of that scene with Ray kind of discovering the box and things like that, that was everything slowed down. And I really, because Ray knew he didn't know what was in the box, but he knew what was in the box. And it was really, really well done. And the fact that it cut to black and then we hear the champagne cork, I mean, it was just
Yep.
it was a great idea for sure.
Believe it or not, we spent a lot of time discussing how to cut that scene, how to cut the end of that scene. Where's the end frame going to be? How do we show the box? Do we double cut the reveal of the head? We had a lot of for something that was seemingly very simplistic in the way it was shot. Every option, every version of that edit that we did had a different feel, which is interesting. That's sort of the power of editing. But it always had a unique. It was always saying something different, in an interesting way. And ultimately, we felt this was the best way to not be gratuitous, but also be shocking.
And to your point regarding the editing, there's a lot of parallel stories that are happening. And
Yes.
one thing that I enjoyed, as you know, trying to analyze this, but also trying to just have fun and watch it, is that I was never lost. I understood what was going on in each of these parallel storylines. So I think that
Oh, that's
speaks
great.
volumes of the talent of you and your team for sure.
Oh, well, thank you. We had a terrific, we had a terrific team. That episode was shot by, those scenes in particular were shot by Jonathan Van Tulken. I also worked with Marcella Said on a bunch of episodes. Um, of course, Ridley Scott was involved. And then Peter Craig, who was the showrunner, executive producer, and also director on one of the episodes. He was the one that really made sure that everything was the overall arc of the story was being told correctly. In each episode, we had to make sure each episode was planting us for the next episode, and everything made sense. And in crime dramas like this, crime thrillers like this, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot of pieces and parts we have to track. One of the big things that we had to sort of make sure we understood was the the story of the gun. How did that get this to Ray? Because that went over a number of episodes, and we had to make sure that that was landing correctly. In addition to all the people, the DEA, the bikers, the head, we had a gun, and because that was a very important piece of the story.
Now, correct me if you're wrong. You're a Philadelphia native, yes?
I am.
What was it like kind of getting back to your roots, so to say, and seeing Philly in a different light?
It was kind of surreal. I would see these. Episode 3 in particular has a number of scenes that I was familiar with, with where these areas were. I did go to Temple University, which was not far from some of these areas, and it was interesting to see the funeral, seeing City Hall and the funeral. That was interesting. There's a future episode, in episode 7. I won't say what was happening, but when I was cutting that scene, I was watching something, and I went, this area looks kind of familiar to me. I'm not quite sure what this is. And I looked up on the call sheet, the address, and I realized now it's a coffee shop. But back when I lived in Philadelphia, it was a bank. And I sort of recognized, and it was literally like the town over from where I grew up. So it was fun to see all this. It definitely made me homesick. I'm not sure I want to be in Ray's world, but it, it was it was fun. It was fun to see all this.
Back to Ray here for a second.
Mhm.
Ray seems to really enjoy music. There's a few times there's the phone, and then when he's listening to his records, and we see his giant record collection, and what I found interesting is that there's not a lot of score in the show, but there's some diegetic sound that's used. Can you just talk a little bit about that choice?
There was a lot of discussion about uh, I like to call it scores, score and source mixed together. We weren't using music in a way just to be flippant about it. There was always an emotional tone that we were looking for. To Peter Craig's credit, I mean, he just knows music really, really well. And we spent a lot of time discussing like the end cue at the end of episode 3. We spent a lot of time discussing what cue we would put there, what source cue we would put there, what's the feel we want to say. The scene where Malik uh, is being executed, we found a cue, we found a score, a source cue from early '80s rap that this and it has Fat Boys beatboxing, in there, and we really felt that it was sort of like of Malik's character to be listening to music like that.
Mhm.
He would be, we felt he was old school rap, Michael Jordan, Spike Lee era, and took a deep dive. And if you listen to that, if I don't want to say too much, I'll let the Easter egg speak for itself. But if you listen to that cue, from that cue, it does speak to what happens to Malik, and that was the reason we chose that. And we explained that when we told Peter why we did that, uh, he was all on board. He's like, that's cool. That's awesome. So there was reasons why we were choosing these types of cues. Episode 4, we chose for when the tattooed man, as we finally called him, the Sicario. We chose I forget the genre of the music, but it was like Mexican rap. And we chose that specifically for him. Like he would be playing that type of music, not because he's listening to it, because he's announcing himself and
Mhm.
he's making his presence known. And these are the reasons why we chose that. And it gave it a an eerie tone. And if you coupled that with maybe a drone or some sort of rhythmic dark cue on top of that, which we did from time to time, it gave sometimes innocent cues a darkness. And then we also found a lot of times that if you used a piece of music that was contrary to what was happening in the scene, it made the scene even darker.
Mhm.
And we did that from time. Or if we wanted to if we took a scene that was um, a relatively happy scene, happy-ish as much for Dope Thief can be, and you put something contrary to it, it gives it a weird tone. And so we were always trying to go against the grain with that type of
Mhm.
stuff.
The episodes transition, like we were talking about, the different storylines and things like that. One of the things that I noticed is that a lot of times the editorial pace would change as well. Like if we go to the Vietnamese man, Sung,
Mhm.
when we're with him, editing almost seems to slow down just a bit. And can you talk a little bit about those type of editorial choices and how they impact the story?
So Ray and Manny are they're kind of in a free fall. Their lives are kind of in chaos, and they're moving a mile a minute. So a lot of times I would let the rhythm, the pace be in that world, and you would feel the hysteria that's happening around them. So that way, when they did say something that was important, when there was an emotional moment and you gave it a breath, those moments resonated more. Son in it was episode 4. I cut when he's finally arrested, and there's a lot of things happening. In the scene prior to that, he gets surrounded by the police, and he's in front of his children's school. He's just buried his dogs. A lot of wild stuff is happening, and then he gets surrounded by the police at the school, and it's a bit of a chaotic moment. So when we eventually come back to him, he's being interrogated, and we sort of live in those shots. They were, and we were able to slow down the pace because we weren't saying it directly, but we're sort of saying, well, we're giving the question, is he in control? And it's now we're posing a question with the rhythm. Same thing with Mina. Mina, a lot of times, is she majority of the show, she's not using her voice. She's incapable of using her voice because she's been shot. So we linger on her a number of times because she's clocking everything with her eyes. She's angry, she's frustrated, she's sad, or she's in depression because of the man she loved who set her up. She's angry at him, but she's also on a mission to figure out what happened here. And she's really the one who knows like everything, and she knows it, and she has to prove it. So we linger on her to show that she's clocking everything and really processing what's happening around her, to show strength and intelligence.
So, were there any scenes that provided particularly challenging edits? If so, how did you overcome that?
Well, episode 3 was challenging at the end because we had a lot of moving pieces. Ray just says to his father, Ving Rhames, and on his deathbed, he makes sure, even though he doesn't, he basically tells his father, good riddance. But I think there was a deep love between the two of them. And then he basically tells his father, I'm going to have to go out there and die. The bikers are out there to get me. And while he's walking out there and the bikers surround him, the bikers get taken down, we're intercutting the investigations surrounding around them. And we had to track all that. What this piece led to that piece, what is that saying? There was a lot of moving parts to make sure that we were telling that story correctly and understanding how the DEA got the information. What led to what? Michelle, the gun, Ray, Teresa, Bart, bikers. It was a lot, and then ultimately Mina at the end seeing the sketch. It was a rising propulsion of pieces there that were happening. So when Mina eventually sees the sketch of Ray, it's the crescendo, and it's like, oh my, this is what we were leading up to. And so there was a lot of rhythmic editing there that we were trying to figure out, but also making sure we were telling the story correctly. The other scene that was also, I had a terrific time cutting the scene, but it was a challenge, was the quarry fight in episode 4. I've cut a lot of action. I've cut a lot of my experience at Marvel, and I'm also on One Piece for Netflix. There's a lot of action, a lot of visual effects, a lot of things that you're visualizing. And what's interesting about those scenes is you're always, when you're cutting action scenes for those scenes, you're directly in the action. They're willing participants of what's happening around them. In the quarry fight with Ray and Manny, it was a unique sequence because they're unwilling participants. They're really viewers. and they're doing everything they can to get out of this situation. And that's what made it, for me, even more horrific of what was happening around them. Because they're seeing these guys who sort of want to go out, in a hail of bullets, and they're excited about this. And Molotov cocktails, and every turn that happens just gets worse and worse for Ray and Manny. And that was an interesting way of cutting a scene. And also, one of the things that we did is we tried to keep the sound design to be very grounded and rooted in reality. And we didn't play any music overall. That there was no score, and we did that deliberately to really keep everything real. And it was a really interesting way of cutting a scene, because it was a very horrific, to me, it was a very horrific sequence of events.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
That scene, and don't give me any spoilers, please. That scene makes me think about Son's motives in contacting that guy. Because that guy, the we'll call him the quarry guy, just
Cyrus?
kind of, yes, that's his name, just seemed a little unhinged, to say the least. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
definitely with Manny and Ray there, I'm like, what is happening?
And that guy, I don't know his real name, but shout out to him, because his acting was terrific. He really played that role really well. And we actually had to minimize some of that dialogue to keep it moving, because he said there was a lot more to that, and he's just so good. And he was saying things, and Ray was and Brian ad-libbed a little bit. We had to keep some of those lines in, because their banter was so good. Like when they're gearing up to start to do the big shootout, Ray is begging him not to do this, and he's adding this ad lib about Hobbs and Shaw, and we just thought that was hysterical. It was such a great ad lib, and it was just, he's making these jokes, but again, we're going against the grain of what really is happening there. And it was interesting. It was scary. To me, I was just like, I always felt like icky at the end of the night.
I think icky is a great way to put it. So you mentioned before we started rolling here how you collaborated with your assistant editor. How was the collaboration process with the director and the rest of the creative team vital to you?
So episodes 4 and 7 were directed by Marcella Said, and she's just terrific. She would call me from set. We would FaceTime all the time. She would tell me the things that she was shooting. I would send her scenes, usually at the end of the week. We would discuss it. And she would ask me my thoughts and vice versa. And great working collaboration. When production was over, we would work through Evercast, and we would run scenes together, run the show together. We met on the show, but we developed a shorthand very quickly. And I found that we were sort of creatively on the same page almost immediately. She liked to shoot a lot of footage, a lot of stuff from not traditional. It was very unconventional footage, what she shot, and the shots would stand out on their own. And what I was able to do with her footage was find ways of using majority of it so that it served the story. And she was thrilled. And she got great coverage of people, Ray in isolation, or shadows, or just really non-traditional way of telling a very complicated story. And then ultimately, when I worked with the producers, Peter Craig, Richard Hughes, and the people over at Scott Free, David Zucker, uh, the initial cuts on my episodes were coming in around 70 to 90 minutes because there was just so much material. And you want to kind of get these down to, let's say, around an hour. That's usually the sweet spot, maybe a little bit less. So we spent a lot of time crafting the episodes, shaping them so that we weren't really losing anything. We just wanted to figure out ways to combine multiple beats into one or multiple or maybe two, so we could tell the story a little bit easier for the audience to easily access.
Thank you. That's crazy. I'd love to see those longer cuts.
But what I always tell people is especially young editors, I always tell everyone, always be willing to try anything and everything, because you just don't know. You don't know where something's going to go. And be open to things. You might try something and it doesn't work. Initially, it doesn't work, but you have that version, you put it aside, and then a couple of versions later, you do something, and now you're going, you know what, that version I did 3 passes ago, there was this aspect of it that I think will work here, and you can do that. And if you do something and just ultimately doesn't work, well, now you have the information to understand where to go. So I think it's very valuable, especially from an editorial perspective, to be willing to try.
Yeah, I always tell my students, you got to duplicate your sequence because you never know when you need to go back and look at something and, find that little tidbit somewhere that you
Oh, well,
five iterations ago.
I mean, I have so many versions of all my sequences. I think on Dope Thief, I must have had 50 versions of each episode, because I was constantly saving them. I was always duplicating something. I was always trying new things. And then you ultimately can start cherry picking and using this part for this version and that part for that version, and you make it into a new version. And so I find that stuff incredibly invaluable.
So speaking of young editors, I want to ask you how your approach to editing has evolved over the course of your career.
Again, I try to be very open to any note that's presented to me. I will generally, even if I don't think it's going to work, I do it. I make a point to do the note, because then I can understand either A, why it doesn't work, or B, this is why you were wrong and it does work. So I always try to do that. I've been very fortunate with my career. I've had a lot of opportunities to work on some great shows with great people. I was on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for years. I worked with Jed Whedon and Marissa Tancherone and Kevin Tancherone and Billy Gerhardt. I worked with some wonderful people, and I learned so much about big visual effects shows from that world, on a network TV schedule. So we had to work really, really, really fast. I'm on this wonderful show right now for Netflix called One Piece, which had a huge viewership, huge numbers on season 1. The fans of that show are just like die hard. They go absolutely crazy over the show. On season 1, they got like 70 million views, something crazy like that. And I'm on season 2 right now, and that show is. I would have said Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a big show. One Piece is just giant. It is a giant production. I was in South Africa this past fall during production, and I was there witnessing what they were doing every day, and it was just amazing. It's just an amazing place to be, and with a big visual effects show like that, A lot of times it's just people on blue screens. The visual effects aren't there. You're pre-visualizing what is happening in your head. Then you have to collaborate with the director, the visual effects department about the ultimate visual effects, and then you have to sort of tell the story. There's a lot of moving pieces there, and then with a show like that, you want to make sure it's a fantastical show. It's big visual effects. It's literally a guy who's made out of rubber, but we have to understand the physics about everything and the logic about everything. Does this make sense in the world that we've created? Dope Thief is actually very similar in that respect. Both Dope Thief and One Piece, there's an aspect of world building that has to happen. So what is the world of Dope Thief? Well, Dope Thief is this drug world, this world that with drug dealers and cartels and this alliance with various groups of people. I don't want to say too much. I'll let you discover that. So you're tracking all this stuff, and you're tracking all the elements of this complicated crime drama, so that you understand who this group is, who that group is, what this does to the story, where are we going, what do we not want to say just yet. So similar but different.
I'd like to know what your guilty pleasure film or television show is. It can be something that you watch when traveling, or if you've had a long day, you just pop it on, or what have you.
Being from Philadelphia, I'm always watching, whenever it's on, Rocky. Any Rocky movie, I will watch it. Doesn't matter. I had my favorites of that franchise. I love those movies. Honestly, I do. I really like the story of an underdog, and I think it's just an incredible story. You know, I will fully admit that Godfather 1, 2, and 3, if they're on, which they tend to be on a lot, I will be more than happy to spend my day watching all of them. And that is a commitment. You can't go wrong with that. And my other guilty pleasure, I can't believe I'm going to admit this. I discovered the MacGyver channel. So the old school MacGyver, not the new one. And
There's a MacGyver channel?
There's the MacGyver channel. I discovered it and I started watching that. And yeah, that's a guilty pleasure.
That's awesome. I didn't even know. I'm gonna have to go look that up.
It's yeah, there's some good ones there. I talk to my assistant Benny about it just about every day on One Piece. You know, this is what I saw last night. So that is a guilty pleasure. I'm not sure.
I wonder if the editorial choices in MacGyver will find their way into the second season of One Piece. That'll be
You never know. I do talk to the producers about what I've seen, and they go, I've gotten some interesting looks. So yeah, I'll leave it. I can't say too much about that.
No problem. Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Thank you.
No problem. That's it for this week. You can check us out at filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Jamie Hitchings. Thanks for watching.